Yeah, here, awake. Hey, well, I'm excited to be with you guys on this Sunday morning. If you and I haven't had the chance to meet, my name is Johnny. I'm the pastor here at Wildlife. And what we're about to do is we're about to head into what we call a time of teaching. So, a great way to follow along as we head into this time is with what we call a message note sheet. It should be underneath your chair. If you have one, why don't you wave it above your head so you know you have one? Awesome stuff. Hey, this is a great way to follow along. It's also a great way for all of us to pursue God in this time. So if you are brand new, we will be using that in this time. Don't think of it like a test. Don't think of it like a quiz. Think of it kind of like a great tool to help you follow along and pursue God this morning. All right. So throughout this time, the fill-ins are going to be on the screens behind me. So use that as a great tool to help you follow along. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to pray for us. But if it is your first time, man, we are so excited that you guys are here this morning. As we head into this time, we really value this time, meaning this time is super important. So this is not a time to be talking to your neighbor. This is not a time to be on your phone during this time. The thing is like you don't even need your phone when you're here at Wildlife on the weekend. So put it in your pocket, put it underneath your chair. If you know yourself enough, maybe just give it to a leader and be like, hey, can you hold on to this later on? And maybe they will sell it or not. I don't know. We'll see by the end of this morning. Could you imagine you go up to your leader at the end of the service, like, can I have my phone back? They're like, oh, sorry, I just sold it on Facebook. I'm so sorry. Guy just picked it up. $400. Pretty sweet deal. I'm going to go ahead and pray for us, and then we're going to jump right in. So, Jesus, thank you so much that we get to do this. We get to be here and be a part of what you're doing here in Wildlife here at Rocky Peak. Jesus, we just ask as we continue this series, as we continue going through your word, would you speak very loudly to us that wherever we're coming from this morning, maybe we're in a hard season, a difficult season, a stressful season, or a really joyful, awesome season. Jesus, wherever we are coming from, we know that you meet us exactly where we are at. Jesus, we're excited. And it's in your name. Amen. Hey, well, if you've been with us over this past summer, we've been in this series called When It Doesn't Make Sense, God is Still God. And in this series, what we've been doing is we've been going through one of the Old Testament books in the first half of the Bible, known as the book of Job. Not Job, Job. If you've been with us, you'll remember that this story is incredible. It's insane if you think about it. For those of us that haven't been here, here's a quick recap of what the book of Job is all about. Now, Job is someone that loves God and trusts God with everything that he has. And what we see in the beginning part of Job's story is almost everything is taken away from him. He loses his family, he loses his property, his possessions, everything is taken away from Job. And Job is at the point in this story where he is going before God and he is saying, God, why are you allowing this to happen? Why is this happening? Any of us in that situation, we would be asking the same question. God, I want you to explain yourself why this is happening. Now, I want to quickly show us a quick recap of kind of what we're going to be looking at this morning from a great organization that we know as the Bible Project. If you're not familiar with the Bible Project, their whole goal is to help you understand the big picture story of the Bible, about how every story, if you think about it, is all pointing to Jesus. And I'm going to show you a different video from the Bible Project that's really going to highlight in just a couple of minutes kind of this section of the book of Job. So do me a favor and turn your attention to the screens.
All of a sudden, God shows up in a whirlwind, and he responds to Job personally. He first responds to Job's accusation that he's unjust and incompetent at running the universe. So God takes Job on a virtual tour of the universe, and he starts asking him all these questions about the order and origins of the cosmos. Was Job ever around when God architected the earth or organized the constellations? Has Job ever commanded the sunrise or controlled the weather? God has his eyes on all of these cosmic details that Job has never even conceived of. Then God starts going into detail describing the grazing habits of mountain goats and how deer give birth, or the feeding patterns of lions and wild donkeys. What's the point of all this? Remember the assumption of Job and his friends about what it looks like for God to run the world according to justice. Underneath that assumption is a deeper one, that Job and his friends have a wide enough perspective on life to make such a claim about how God ought to run the world. And God's response with this virtual tour, it deconstructs all of these assumptions. It first of all shows that the universe is a vast, complex place, and that God has his eyes on all of it, every detail. Job, on the other hand, has only the small horizon of his life experience to draw from. His view of the world is very limited. And so, what looks like divine injustice, from Job's point of view, needs to be seen in an infinitely larger context. Job is simply not in a position to make such a huge accusation about God. After the virtual tour, God asks Job if he would like to micromanage the world for a day, according to the strict principle of justice that Job and his friends assume, punishing every evil deed of every person at every moment with precise retribution. The fact is that carrying out justice in a world like ours, it's extremely complex. It's never black and white, like Job and the friends seem to think. Which leads to God's last point. He starts describing these two fantastic creatures, Behemoth and Leviathan, which some people think are poetic depictions of a hippo and a crocodile. But more likely, they refer to well-known creatures from ancient Near Eastern mythology that are used elsewhere in the Bible as symbols of the disorder and danger that exist in God's good world. These creatures, they're not evil. God's actually quite proud of them, but they're not safe either. The point is that God's world is amazing and very good, but it's not perfect or always safe. God's world has order and beauty, but it's also wild and sometimes dangerous, just like these two fantastic creatures. And so we come back to the big question of Job's suffering. Why is there suffering in God's world? Whether it's from earthquakes or wild animals or from other humans, God doesn't explain why. What he says is that we live in an extremely complex, amazing world that at this stage, at least, is not designed to prevent suffering. And that's God's response. Job challenged God's justice. God responds that Job doesn't have sufficient knowledge about our universe to make such a claim. Job demanded a full explanation from God, and what God asked Job for is trust in his wisdom and character. And so Job responds with
We'll look at that part next week. But hey, as you guys can do me a favor, open up your Bibles to Job chapter 38. We're going to be kind of looking at a couple of verses that this section of the video was highlighting. So Job chapter 38, Job is in the first half of the Bible, again known as the Old Testament. And if you've been with us, you'll remember kind of last weekend, Ryan kind of taught us through 5 different chapters of Job. He did an awesome job. But we're going to now see God's response after being very silent through the past several chapters of Job. So Job chapter 38, and we'll be starting at verse 1. And as you guys are turning there, remember, like God has been silent up to this point. He's been silent, but notice God is not absent in his silence. So we're going to be seeing what God's response is as Job is basically demanding God to show up and like explain why this is all happening. I love how God responds. So Job chapter 38, we're going to be starting in verse 1. So it says in verse 1, then the Lord said to Job, out of the storm. So again, like God comes in the midst of this like crazy storm cloud, which that if I were Job, I would be pretty frightened of what is happening right now. But God speaks out of the cloud and he says this, who is this that obscures my plans with words without knowledge? AKA God's like, hey, Job, you don't know what you're asking. You don't even fully know what I am up to in my situation. And then he says, brace yourself like a man. AKA, hey, Job, man up. I'm about to be very honest with you right now, so brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me. Again, I really believe God is responding to Job very truthfully, but also with full of grace, because that's what we know about who God is. And then verse 4, he says, where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? Tell me if you understand. So God is saying, hey, Job, were you there when I made the entire universe? The answer is no. So he says, who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know who stretched out a measuring line across it. So again, God is saying, hey, Job, you don't understand what you are asking. You think you can run the world better? Awesome. Go for it. But then God's going to take him on this virtual tour of how everything is structured, how everything God designed to work perfectly. And we're going to see Job's response. If you can do me a favor, we're going to jump ahead 2 chapters to chapter 40. And we're going to be looking here at verse 1. So jump ahead, chapter 40 of Job, and we'll be looking at verse 1. So God continues to talk to Job. He says, so the Lord said to Job, will the one who contends, so again, Job is contending with God, thinking like, hey, I can run the world better than you. He says, will the one who contends with the Almighty correct him? Let him who accuses God answer him. So again, God's being very truthful, but also very graceful. When he's like, hey, you don't fully know what you are accusing me of saying. Like, you don't fully understand. And then in verse 3, Job answered the Lord, I am unworthy. How can I reply to you? I put my hand over my mouth. AKA Job's like, hey, I'm going to shut up now. Clearly, I've put my own foot in my mouth because I don't understand how everything works like I say I do. Like, God, clearly you know better than I do, and I need to learn to trust in you. Verse 5, I spoke once, but I have no answer. Twice, but I will say no more. Now, do me a favor. It's not there on your note sheet, but jump down here to verse 9. I love what God says. He says, hey, do you have an arm like God's? And can your voice thunder like this? Like God saying, like, hey, are you anything like me? No. And what we're going to see is God is trying to give Job a different perspective, because our perspective of how the world operates, how it's run, is very limited when it comes to understanding all the vastness that God has structured and ordered. So if you are brand new, that's our passage for this morning. But what I want to do with the rest of our time is I want to unpack this further, because there is so much there. Again, God speaks for a couple of chapters, and Job is just like, I am unworthy. Like, who am I to contend with the Almighty? So what I want to do is I want to unpack this with what we call the big thing. So there in your note sheet, we have a section called Big Thing. And here's your first fill-in if you're taking notes. Here's the big thing on the screen behind me. God doesn't always give answers. He gives himself. God does not always give answers. He gives himself. So again, Job was going before God, and he was saying, God, I want you to come down here and explain yourself to me. That is pretty bold language that Job is presenting to God. But notice God says, okay, I'll come down to you. He comes in the form of a storm cloud. Pretty epic, pretty awesome. But notice God doesn't answer all of his questions. Again, the big question Job is asking, like, hey, why am I suffering? Why do you allow evil to happen? I don't know if you've ever thought about that. Like, why does God allow evil to happen in this world? Like, why are there earthquakes? Why do people die from sickness? Why do bad things happen? And God doesn't answer all of those questions. But what God does do is that he gives more of himself to Job. And in our situation as well, you might be going through something right now where you have questions, and you go before God and you're saying, why? Like, why are you allowing this to happen? You might question who God is. You might even start questioning, God, are you even real? But notice how God responds to Job, and he responds to so many of us in the same way. He may not always give you the answer you want or the answer you think you deserve, but he'll give more of who he is, because that's what God does. But he also gives us a different perspective, and that's what he did with Job. So what I want to do with the rest of our time is I want to unpack this with two truths that I think we should talk about. So there in your section on the bottom, we have a section called When God Speaks, Two Truths That We Need to Talk About. So let's talk about them, all right? Here's the first one on your note sheet. Write this down. Number one, God is bigger than we realize. God is bigger than we realize. Now, I don't know about you, but most of us in this room, or at least maybe some of us in this room, we tend to only think about God in two situations. One, we only think about God sometimes when we're here at Wildlife, when we're here at church. Other times, we only think about God maybe when life is being really difficult, when life is getting really, really hard. But the truth is that we often forget that God is big and God is everywhere. And God is so much bigger than we realize. So what I want to do is I want to teach you a very cool sounding word. This is a theological word, meaning in theology, meaning the study of God. That's fancy. There's a cool fancy word meaning that God is everywhere all the time, and I want to teach you to it. And also you can teach your parents on your way home, because I guarantee you most of your parents don't even know what this word is, except maybe a couple of your parents. But here's the word I want to teach you. So God is everywhere. Here's your next fill-in. God is omnipresent. Some of you knew it. Well done. Good job, RPK. Omnipresent, meaning that God is everywhere all the time. God is omnipresent. He is everywhere all the time. God is bigger than we even realize. One of the Old Testament kings in the first half of the Bible, known as King David, if you are familiar with the story of the Bible, King David is the one that was a shepherd boy. There was a movie that I think came last year. I heard it was awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. So good. David is the one that killed Goliath. You know, Goliath, he threw a stone at Goliath's head. Goliath fell over. And then this is something you probably didn't know in RPK, is that then David chopped off Goliath's head with a sword. Awesome. Violent. If anyone's like, the Bible's boring. No, it's not, dude. Read the book of Judges. Crazy. But what we see in David's life is David knew this. David knew that God is omnipresent. He is everywhere all the time. And he says this in one of the most famous Psalms found in the book of Psalms, Psalm 139. Follow along with me. David says, "Where can I go from your spirit?" AKA, hey, God, where can I go where you're not there? He continues, he says, "Where can I flee from your presence? If I go up to the heavens, you're there. If I make my bed in the depths, you are there." God is bigger than we realize. And God is omnipresent, meaning God is everywhere all the time. And Wildlife, I think that should bring us some comfort. That for a lot of us in this room, we might be going through something right now that is just really difficult and really hard. And you might feel completely alone in it. Maybe there's stuff going on at home. There's stuff going on in like a friendship of yours. Maybe there's something going on deep inside of you that you don't even know what's going on. It just makes you feel depressed. You feel anxiety. You feel worried. And you just don't know. The truth that God is omnipresent should bring us comfort, because wherever we go, doesn't matter where you go. You go to Target, or you go to the evil one, Walmart, like you go to Trader Joe's, like wherever you go, God is with you. You go to your friend's house, God is with you. God is omnipresent, and God is bigger than we realize. Number two is this. Number two is our perspective is limited. Our perspective is limited. So what I want to do with this point is I want to unpack these two specific words, not because I don't think you know what these words mean. I'm sure a lot of us in this room know what the word perspective and limited mean. But in the context of this story in Job, I think it matters a lot, because Job had a very limited perspective on how the whole world is run and how it operates. Even though he thought he knew exactly what was going on, and God's like, hey, here's the thing, you don't. I need you to trust me that I know what I'm doing. And Job was completely humbled. So what I want to do with this time is I want to unpack these two words. So I recently went to chat and I asked, hey, what's a good definition for perspective? Someone last night was like, Gemini's better. Okay, it's all AI. You know, it's all going to take over. But here's what the definition gave me. There in your note sheet I put there. So perspective is the way someone sees, understands, or thinks about a situation based on their experiences and point of view. Now, when I think of perspective, I think of roller coasters. Like, a lot of us have different perspectives when it comes to roller coasters. That some of us in this room, man, we love a good roller coaster. Others of us, anything else but a roller coaster, right? Can we pull up that image on the screen behind me? Like, this image of a roller coaster, like some of us in this room were like, yeah. Others of us were like, no. like that looks insane. And here's what I want you to catch. When it comes to roller coasters, for example, that a lot of us have different perspectives when it comes to a roller coaster, really based off of the experience that we've had on a roller coaster. Because I'm sure a majority of us in this room have been on at least some type of roller coaster, whether it's something like this thing or something like Incredicoaster or something less intense. We all have some sort of an experience when it comes to a roller coaster or some sort of an amusement park ride. But the truth is that a perspective of a roller coaster kind of shapes how we interact with it, right? That for some of us in this room, when it comes to a roller coaster, we get stoked. Others of us are like, please no. Like for me, like one of the roller coasters at Six Flags Magic Mountain that like hear me, I love roller coasters, but there are some roller coasters that I just despise because of the experience that I had on them. For example, anyone ever been on Tatsu at Six Flags? Yeah. Tatsu and I don't talk anymore, all right? And let me explain why. When I was younger, I went on Tatsu not once, but twice. The second time was like, I can try it again. Let's see. Anyway, the first time I went on Tatsu, and if you've been on the ride before, like a loop, like a regular loop on a roller coaster, like it's awesome. You're like, oh, there goes my phone. Dang it. But like a regular roller coaster has like a loop. Tatsu has this evil thing called an inverted loop. Have anyone experienced this? So instead of like doing like a normal loop, you're going like this and you go upside down and then backwards. And that's where a part of me died that one time. I got off the ride and I was as white as a ghost. And my friends were like, you good? And I was like, no, not at all. Like, I need some electrolytes. I need that. And then later on, not in the same day, but another time, I thought, well, like, maybe I was just having an off day. So I went it on again, and the exact same thing happened. This inverted loop, again, I died a little bit again inside. So when it comes to Tatsu, like my perspective on, it's an evil ride, okay? But other rides like Goliath or other, like Ghost Rider at Knott's Berry Farm, I love those rides, right? But what I want you to catch is that all of us have different perspectives on roller coasters. And in the same way, we all have different perspectives on different things based off of the experiences we've experienced or the point of view of those things. The second word I want to highlight is this word limited. Look at this definition. Limited means restricted or incomplete, not having the full amount, ability, knowledge, or view. That a lot of us have a limited perspective on how the world operates. And what God was telling Job was like, hey, you don't understand what you are asking, even though you think you do. This world is vast. And what's cool is God took Job on this virtual tour. Like, hey, do you know how all these things operate? The reality is you don't. And the truth is you don't really need to know because God's in control of all of it. Let me kind of illustrate it like this. Has anyone ever seen like a little ant before? Yeah. They're so fun to step on, like they're like, oh, it's adorable. But like, if you think about it, an ant is super tiny. An ant will never understand how epic and evil Tatsu is. Like it won't, like it just won't at all. But if you've ever been like on a Chromebook before doing schoolwork or maybe on your dad's computer or you're trying to play Minecraft or something, and then out of nowhere, you just see this little ant walk across your laptop. Can you pull up that image? Like it's kind of like this small little ant truly will never know what this computer can truly do because it just can't understand it fully because it's an ant and this is a laptop. And in the same way, I once heard a pastor say it like this, like for us to fully understand who God is would be like describing the internet to an ant. It just won't happen because we have a limited view on these things. So here's what I want to do. A limited perspective is this. Here's your next fill-in on your note sheet. A limited perspective is when we only see part of the situation, not the whole picture. A limited perspective is when we only see a part of the situation, not the whole picture. You see, Job didn't understand at the time. He thought he knew what was going on. And God's like, here's the thing, you don't. You have a limited perspective where God, he sees the whole picture. He sees the big epic story of what's going on. And the truth is, we think that way too. We think we know what's going on, and we go before God. God, why is this happening? And we start making assumptions, and God's like, hey, you don't understand because we have a limited perspective. Unlike us, God is all-knowing. So I want to teach you a second fancy theological word, and this is the word, your next fill-in is that God is omniscient. God is omniscient, meaning God knows everything. God is omniscient. God knows everything. In wildlife, that should bring us comfort because when we don't know the why, God knows the why. And we may ask God, can you tell me the why? And sometimes he may not tell us. There's this awesome prophet in a book in the Old Testament known as Habakkuk. Now, I'm not going to get into all of it, but Habakkuk was a prophet, meaning someone that spoke on behalf of God, that they would prophesy on behalf of God. These are like Old Testament prophets. We don't have any prophets today. And what was going on, Habakkuk started to question God. God, why is this happening? Like, tell me what's going on. Tell me the why. And God's response, it's not there in your note sheet, but you can check it out in the first chapter of Habakkuk. God responds saying, Habakkuk, if I told you what was going on, you wouldn't believe me. And the truth is sometimes when we ask God why, God might respond to us with like, hey, if I told you what was going on, if I told you the why, even if I told you, you wouldn't believe it. Because God knows everything. He sees the big picture. Look at this passage found in Isaiah. God says this to the prophet Isaiah. He says, for my thoughts are not like your thoughts. Like the way God thinks, the way God operates is nothing like us. God knows everything. It continues, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. God knows everything. He knows exactly what's going on in your situation. He knows exactly what's going on deep inside of you. When you don't understand, when you don't know the why, we can find comfort that God does know why. And sometimes we don't get to know the why, and that's something we get to wrestle with. That maybe a couple of examples are this, is that maybe for you, this fall, you're hoping to try out for a sports team at school. Maybe it's basketball or football or something like that. You're hoping to make the sports team at school. And imagine for a moment, you try so hard. You practice, you do all the laps, you do everything you got to prepare. You practice every single day. And you go to try out, let's say basketball, for example, because that's what I played when I was in middle school. And you go to practice and you go to the tryouts and you thought you were doing really well. You thought this was going to be awesome. Clearly, they need me on the team. And then you find out you don't make the team and you immediately get frustrated. You immediately get mad. And for you, you start thinking, God, why? Why am I not on the team? I put all the work, I put all the effort in. Like, I thought I was going to make it. We may not know the why, but God does. Or think of it maybe like this, that maybe for you, you have a really good friend in your life, someone that is like a brother or a sister that you actually like, okay? Like someone that you really care about, and man, they're just your best friend. Now imagine out of nowhere, this friend just stops talking to you out of nowhere. Like they just ghost you out of nowhere. And it's been several days, maybe even weeks, and you're like, what is going on? Maybe for you, you start questioning yourself, like maybe did I do something? Did I say something wrong? Like, was it my breath? Like did I do something? And you might go before God and you might go, God, I don't understand why. But the truth is God does know the why. Or maybe the last one is this, that maybe for you, you recently really wanted something to happen in your life. Maybe you want that next thing or whatever. So anyway, you go to your parents and you ask and you're like, Mom, Dad, I really want this, or I want to go to my friend's house, or I want to do this, I want to do that. And they just respond with no. And like any of us would do, we would say, well, why? And I don't know about you, have you ever had your parents just say like, hey, well, I need you to trust me? And maybe for some of us in this room, you've had a parent just say no to you and you get mad at them. You get frustrated at them. But here's the thing is sometimes when a parent says no to us, it's because they see something that we don't. And I know right now here in middle school, you might go, no, my parents they hate me. They're not fair. It just doesn't make any sense. Like they just don't want me to do whatever it is. Here's the truth is that sometimes your parents may say something to you and you may not realize why they're saying no. But hear me, a majority of us in this room, like your parents love you. Your parents care a lot about you. And here's the thing is that when they say no to you, it's because they're protecting you. Here's a great example of this is that maybe for you, you really want to hang out with this friend at school and you're like, hey, Mom, Dad, can I go to their house on Friday night to play video games or whatever it is, hang out with them, go swimming or something like that. And your parent says no. And you start to question, you're like, well, why? Like their parents will be there, like they have floaties because they can't really swim. Like it's fine, like it'll be okay. Like, and your parents say no. And the reality is that looking back in my life, when my parents have said no to me, in the moment, I just thought they were being unfair or not realistic. Like, Mom, Dad, you just hate me. That's stupid. Like, but looking back now as a parent, I can see they were protecting me, because maybe for you with that friend that you really want to hang out with, that your parents know that if you hang out with this person, they're going to be a terrible influence on you. This is just a scenario. If it's real, awesome. If not, it's awesome too. But like the truth is that your parents care so much about you that when they say no to you, it's because they're protecting you. Because your parents know that if you hang out with this person, they might be a terrible influence on you, that maybe for you, it's going to lead down this path that's going to get incredibly dangerous. So when a parent says no to you, we might wrestle and ask why that's not fair, but it's because they're protecting you. And in the same way, God is like that too. God sees what we can't see, because we have a limited perspective, but God's perspective is infinite. We can't even comprehend it. So as we wrap up, the bottom line is this, is that we may not know the why, but God does. So there on the bottom of your note sheet, we have a section called Action Step. If you're brand new to Wildlife, an action step is basically how can we live this out so we can go and become more like Jesus. If you're not familiar with this, like our goal here in Wildlife is to unleash a movement of passionate 6th, 7th, and 8th grade Christ followers, meaning we want to unleash you guys to become more like Jesus. And that is a slow process that a lot of us in this room, myself included, we wish that process was like a microwave. Like 2 minutes and boom, I'm like Jesus. But the reality is that sometimes it's kind of like a crock pot. It takes time. And you can tell the difference between something in the microwave and something in a crock pot. It takes time. So here's the action step. Write this down. When life doesn't make sense, remember who God is. When life doesn't make sense, remember who God is. That as we learned this morning, remember that God is omnipresent, meaning he is everywhere all the time. And that should bring us comfort for when we feel alone, God is there. And the second one is God is omniscient, meaning God knows everything about everything. He knows the why when we don't know the why. And in the same way, we need to put our trust in him, because God's with us. God knows what we don't. God is still good, and we can trust God because of this. Now, as the band comes up, I want to walk us through this one last passage that's really for those of us in this room that want to take this action step seriously, that I'll just be totally honest with a lot of us. Like, I get it. Some of us in this room, we're here because our parents just dropped us off or whatever. We're here because we're going to a friend's house after Wildlife, or maybe you slept over at your friend's house last night, and then their mom was like, we're going to church. And you're like, we're going to what? Like you're here because maybe you are forced to be here. And I totally get that. I'm so glad you're here though. Others of us in this room, maybe we're here because we actually want to be here. Maybe for you, your parents kind of started to sleep in a little bit this morning. You're like, Mom and Dad, we got to go to church. I'm like, okay, yeah, totally. Here's the thing. For those of us that actually want to be here, those of us in this room that actually want to become more like Jesus, I want to walk us through really quickly this passage. In the second book of the Bible, known as the book of Exodus, we see God for the first time, this is the first time in the entire Bible, reveal his very character, meaning who God is at his core. So when life doesn't make sense, we need to remember who God is. And this is the first time we'll see that in the entire Bible. So my challenge for those of us this week that want to take this action step seriously, I would encourage you every day this week, would you for a minute or two, just read this passage and maybe underline certain words. Maybe for you, if you feel comfortable enough, grab a journal and start asking questions based off of this. And then it's so cool to talk about it. So look at this passage there in your note sheet. So it says, the Lord, or Lord all caps means Yahweh, this personal name for God. Yahweh passed in front of Moses, calling out. He said, Yahweh the Lord, or Yahweh Yahweh, the God of compassion, mercy. He says, I am slow to anger, and I am filled with unfailing love and faithfulness. And I lavish unfailing love to 1,000 generations, and I forgive iniquity, rebellion, and sin. What I want us to focus on this morning is that word forgiving, the word faithfulness, meaning that God is a faithful God, meaning he cannot lie. It goes against who he is. So when we don't fully understand, when we don't know what's going on, we can remember God is faithful. So this week, as you are going throughout your day, as you're going throughout the rest of your summer vacation, remember who God is, that God is a faithful God. He is good. He loves you, and he will never lie to you. Let's go ahead and let's pray. So Jesus, thank you so much that we get to do this. We get to be here. And Jesus, we're thankful that you're faithful. You will not lie to us. You are a good God that cares about us. And Jesus, when we don't fully understand what's going on, we know that you do. So as we go into this last song of worship, Jesus, would you remind us of who you are through this song? Because Jesus, we love you. It's in your name. Amen. Hey, I'm going to invite you guys to stand on up and just stay where you are. Please don't go to the back. We're going to be worshiping together as one body this morning. So let's go ahead and let's go into this last song of worship.